Let's see. Can you talk and make sure your levels are coming in okay?
Hello, hello.
Sweet.
Cool.
Everything looks good on my end. And looks like we've got some people in the chat. In the chat, can you let us know if you can hear us okay?
Yay.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. This is the third live stream that we're doing with my friend Guy Rambo. We decided to do it today so we didn't conflict with the World Cup game where Brazil is playing. And it is sure to be loud over there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm a little bitter that Mexico's out, but that's fine.
Yeah, you can always get what you want.
Okay, so a little recap of what we are building. I have started doing transcriptions for my videos using rev.com. Rev.com provides transcription services. It costs $1 a minute. You give them a video, and they will give you back captions and subtitles in different languages if you want. And the way that this works is you log in and upload a file or give them access to a publicly accessible URL, which they will download. And then some period of time later, could take 48 hours, could take 4 or 5 days, but they'll come back and tell you your order is complete and you can download the assets. And those come as text files or VTT files or whatever you want. They do have an API, and so in my quest to automate some of the processes that I make as part of my NSScreencast episodes, I thought it'd be fun to start interacting with their API. And then this whole Mac app live stream thing happened, and I was like, let's just make a real application that's useful. And so that's what we are building. The API is pretty basic, and what we're going to be working on today, we're still trying to post inputs. So there's two ways to post inputs. The first one we did last time, which is if we see a list of the orders here, and if you click New Order, we can pick the order type we want, and then we can add a URL here. And so if I add an URL, it will upload, or rather post that URL to the service, and then show us the input URN here in the table. And then later on, we'll be able to submit the order with these inputs. So what I want to tackle this time, if you're up for it, is taking a video that we already have and just like dragging it over here. So support drag and drop. Drop it on there and have the upload happen, and then show some progress on this screen so that we can see like how far the upload is going or how fast it is and all that. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. So we did the easy implementation, which was the URL thing, and now we have to actually upload files, which is gonna be fun.
So in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about the Mac app side of things. I've already worked on the uploading portion of this, and I'll talk about that first really quickly, but I've already written it just to sort of focus on the Mac stuff. I am running the latest Xcode beta 3. So if it crashes, it's par for the course, but it's been pretty good. I've been using it primarily for, since dub, and it's good.
Adding some more excitement to the live stream using beta software.
Yeah, indeed. And okay, to answer the chat, this is inside. _inside.
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the interface for this. So I already had this Rev client that I made a while back as a way to interact with their API. And it takes credentials, which are based on whether we're in sandbox or production mode. And then it knows about the client key and user key that we need to sign or authenticate the request. And up till now, all of these requests have been like basic things like this, where you call a function, you give it some parameters, it builds the request, and then we'll call you back using this completion block. And that's pretty standard for most gets and posts and things. But for our upload a file, which is the next one here, this one needs to take a file URL, which is a URL to a file on disk, and it needs to do two things. It needs to indicate progress of that file. To do that, that means we need to build a new session that is based on a delegate. And the delegate methods are what are going to tell us about the status of that upload. So we have these down here, did complete with error, and did receive response, and did receive data, and then finally the progress method that we need, session did send body data. And so those four methods, we need to implement all four of those and sort of keep track of what's happening. So this one seemed a little bit different, and so I just wanted to do this ahead of time so we can focus more on the Mac stuff. So what happens is we build this thing called an upload status, and that'll hang on to the, let me find that struct in here. This upload status will hang on to a progress. This class is NS progress, and it's sort of a model object representing work to be done. And so in our case, our work to be done is a certain number of bytes to upload. And so we can communicate that progress here. It does a lot more than that. It can do like aggregating child progress and things like that. If you have many things that are going on, say we're uploading 10 files, we can show progress for the individual ones as well as the overall aggregate status.
Yeah, I really recommend that people study the progress class because it's really powerful. You can share it across processes, and you can aggregate multiple progresses with like a full completion for all of them and separate completions for each one. So it's very powerful, and it's all observable through KVO. And breaking news, iOS 12 public beta 2 is now available. So after this live stream, people who are watching can go and update their devices, but watch the stream first.
Yeah, breaking news. You heard it here first. Okay. So these are the things that we have to sort of hang on to during an upload. And so one of those things is a response. We need to know if this response was successful. And if it was not successful, I need to look at the body of the response to see what the error message is. So in the success case, we upload the file, and they give us a response header that is the location of the URN of the file on their system. But in the failure case, that error message comes in body data, so we need to hang on to that. So if we go back to the upload file method, this sets up the request using content disposition to set the file name. And then we stream that upload with this upload task. I'm also returning the task, which is, the reason for this is I want to be able to cancel the upload. In the UI, there's going to be a cancel button, so we need to be able to cancel it. And then if an error happens, let's go back down here. If an error happens, then we will, there it is. We'll check to see if the request actually had an error, in which case that would be like a timeout or server misconfiguration or whatever. But if we actually got a response, that is not considered an error in the URL session API's mind. So if we actually got a response, but that response was an HTTP 400, that indicates that the request was successful, but in logical domain terms, it failed. And so I'm creating my own error in that case. So if we get a 201, that's good. If we got a 400, then we're going to present an error that this request failed. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Looks like we have a question. Well, I don't know. Kyle, if you want to rephrase your question, if that is a question, let me know.
I think he was talking about the public beta. I told him to install only after the live stream. He's probably installing it right now.
Yeah, probably. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Do you want to talk about the life cycle of like a drag and how that system works?
Well, it has several different states it can be in. So you can handle it in a view, and the view receives a drag entered event when you start dragging something inside of that view, and you can define the type of operation that's going to happen if the user drops that item inside that view. So you can say that the operation will be a copy. So the
Is that kind of
little
like where if you have two Finder windows open and you do this, and then I hold the Option key, we get
yeah
the little plus button, right, to
yeah
copy versus
exactly.
move.
So you can define that. So you can define if the operation is going to be a copy or a move, or if it's prohibited. So you can't drop that item in there. And then when the drop actually happens, you have to handle the drop. So you decide what you want to do with the drop, and you do that using a paste board. So
Okay.
it's kind of shares API with the clipboard API. So you have to read the
Mm-hmm.
dragging paste board, and then you access the file that way. And of course, we are talking about files here, but drag and drop can work for basically any data type.
Right. Okay, so what I want to do is just drop inside the table area. And from my initial look at the documentation, it looks like there's table view delegate methods for handling that.
Yeah, I think the table view can handle the drop.
Okay, so let's go into our new order group here. In the new order view controller, we have, let's see, this structure of this. Looks like we've got some table view delegate stuff right here, or that's data source stuff. Maybe I make another extension. And so then there's table view, let's see, drag. Is it this one? The validate drop?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay, so this takes the table view, a dragging info, the proposed row. So that's, I don't really care about this, but if I wanted to like insert this at one position in the table, looks like that's
Yeah.
how that would happen.
I think you should increase the font size so people
Okay.
have an easier time reading.
Yes.
Maybe
Sorry about that.
hide some of the panels as well.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, the dragging info, that's where you're going to get the paste board from, so you can read the actual data that's being dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And the proposed row is where inside your table view the user is dropping. You can choose to ignore that and just drop at the end. So if you're not interested in the order, you can just ignore that. The drop operation is that thing we talked about how you can use copy or move or different types of operations. And then you return an drag operation, which is going to tell the system whether that drop is getting handled or canceled. So if you cancel the drop, the item is going to fly back to its original position.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if you start the drag, there's like a dragging pasteboard that contains the items that I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this could be like a file and like a snippet of text and an image and whatever else.
Yeah, and
So we
it
need to
can be an
look inside
URL
there.
as well.
So when we look at the pasteboard, there is a read objects for classes method. And so what I was thinking is the type of these is going to be URL, right?
Yeah.
And then, let's see. I'm not sure why we're having to fix that up.
Yeah, the problem is that this API is an Objective-C API, and URL is a value type. So, and when you reference the class itself, so the type itself, I think it can't do the bridging automatically for you.
Uh-huh.
We could use a string instead, and I think that will give us the path instead of an URL.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see if this works. Okay, so then there's some options that we have. Let's look at the NS pasteboard .reading option key. And this is one I was looking at earlier. URL for reading file URLs, URL reading file URLs only. So that way it won't match remote URLs. So if we do
Yeah.
use URL, I think when I was playing around with this earlier, I think I ended up using NSURL.self to get around that error. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure if that's
probably.
what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think so. Since we're using an API that deals with Objective-C stuff, I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to do is make sure that this only matches certain file types. So I don't want like text files and stuff like that to be. I don't want text files to be matched, or anything else, images or whatever. It should just be videos. So I know that there's these UTIs, these universal type identifiers.
Yeah.
So we've got a type of movie, and then I think there's a way to restrict the ones that we get back to only those types. I don't remember what it's called though. Oh, there it is. URL reading contents conform to type.
Yeah.
So I think it does have to be URL for us to get this behavior.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're right. So the cool thing about these enumerations is that you can actually just go by feeling. Basically, you use autocomplete to check
Yeah.
the options that are available and just try them out.
Sorry, I'm seeing in the chat that it's not the font size that's legible. It looks
It's
like
fine.
it's the video.
I think refresh the page because I just refreshed here and it looks fine.
Okay.
So I think that's an issue on their end.
Okay, so yeah, let me clean up this mess here. So the reason why I'm doing this separate is because if I hit enter here, or sometimes if I start typing, I don't get the dot completion. And it seems like that is like I'm not sure if this is an Xcode 10 issue or
it's an Xcode issue.
issue in general. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm just defining these options ahead of time so that I can use dot. And it does seem like it's really confused at the moment. Let me comment that out. So this was URL reading contents conforms. Yeah, this is super frustrating when I'm working in Swift. Like the goal is just to be able to type dot and see what options there are, but sometimes I will have to do this and then just delete it.
Yeah, that's what I usually do. Yeah.
Okay, so that needs to be conforms to types. So I just need the movie type in there, KUT type movie, and then true here. Okay.
Yep.
So again, the goal here is to look at all the objects in the pasteboard and only return the ones that are of this type and that match this UTI and is a local file URL.
Yeah, and using UTIs for that is a really cool thing because you don't have to worry about what's a movie because the system has knowledge of what a movie file is, and it's going to automatically filter, and it's going to work for different types of movie files. So whether it's a MOV or M4V or any of those files, it's going to recognize them.
Okay, so in the documentation, this documentation is actually really good. So it gives you an example of 2 images, 2 attributed strings, and 1 custom pasteboard type. So if you have your own custom records or whatever, you can build your own pasteboard support for custom stuff as well.
Yeah.
In that case, it would just be an NS data. And it says it returns nil if there's an error. So that's why I'm doing this. So in the case where we can't drag, the documentation I found, and also in this old book that I've been reading, they say return NS dragging operation NSDrag operation none. But they removed this. And the reason why they removed this is that this conforms to option set in Swift.
Huh.
And
That's
NSDrag
cool.
operation none is an alias for 0.
Ah.
And I read in the dev forums that the reason why because I would rather just return .none, that reads a lot better. But because it's an option set, it would also allow you to do this, which is weird.
Oh, yeah.
And so
definitely.
they opted just to remove that alias, and now you just return an empty set. So it's a little bit strange. Okay, so in this case, we have matching URLs, and we don't have to do anything. We're just informing the system that this drag can continue, right? So at this point, I can return NSDrag operation .copy.
Yeah.
And I guess we don't really care what the URLs are here. Let's see.
You can do a nil comparison, I guess.
I think I'm going to reuse this though, but
yeah. And there's also, if we didn't want to actually read the contents, I think there's also a can read objects method.
Well, the reason why I said that is we have another table view method, which is, so that's validate drop. The other one is accept drop.
Yeah, so this is where we are actually going to perform the drop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I need to do the same exact thing. So what I was thinking is just extract this into a function.
Mm-hmm. That's what I usually do.
Let's see, movie URLs in pasteboard. Let's see, in.
That's more Swifty.
Yeah. And that'll return an array of URLs. So then I can pasteboard dot read objects for classes nsurl.self with those options. I'll do this in 2 lines for clarity. So matching objects as URL or empty array. Because the type you get back here is an array of any. Okay, so now with that, I should be able to say if that's not empty. So matching, what do I call it? Movie URLs?
Yeah.
In info.dragging pasteboard is empty. And I'll just switch these. Okay, so now in the accept drop, I do think I want to print something out here, just so we can see it as we're testing out, and then print accept drop, and then I'll print out that movie URLs thing. Dragging pasteboard. That way we can run it.
After returning something from this method?
Yep. So I'll return false. So if you return false, does this like snap back to its original position?
Yeah.
So it's like another step in validate. This can validate the cursory things that you can find out by file name and the content type. And then if you look inside the file and realize, oh, I already had this one uploaded, or this is actually not a valid supported movie after I look at it, then we can return false there.
Yeah, in this case, we are doing basically the same thing on both, but you could imagine a situation where the actual reading of the pasteboard would be an expensive operation. so you can validate without actually reading the contents themselves. But in this case, since it's just file types and stuff, it's easy for us to just validate all the time.
Okay, so looks like so
Nothing.
nothing. I know what's wrong. We forgot the
Me
first step.
too. Yeah.
So in view did load, which do we not have one of those? I guess we don't.
Wow, that's rare.
Yeah. Let's see. I usually like to separate these things up so I can keep some semblance of order in here. View lifecycle. Okay, so what we need to do here is tell the table view that we need to register for dragged types. And then what is this type? Pasteboard type. I'm not sure which one of these we need.
Try autocomplete.
Register for dragged types dot file URL.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, file promises came up at DubDub, and I wasn't aware of file promises before. And it's possible you could support file promises in this app. What that would mean is if I had, say, a video here in not here, but in Safari. If I had a video in Safari and I wanted to take that video and drag it from Safari into my app, that video exists remotely. And so it doesn't exist on disk, so they can't give you a file yet, but they can give you a file promise. And if you accept drag types for file promises, then you can accept drags from Keynote, Mail, Photos, and Safari. And
So
maybe
anything
other apps.
that can become a file eventually
Right.
is a file promise.
Right. But I don't think any of those are necessary for us right now, so let's just look at file URL.
So is file promise only available in Mojave, or is it?
No, this is it was introduced in Sierra.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so new order. Let's open up Finder, drag, bam. So validate drop gets called multiple times depending on where you are in the list. So if you wanted to validate that, like, oh, you can only insert things at the beginning or the end of the list, you could do that. But yeah, really interesting. Okay, so then when I let go, it gives me my file URL. So that's cool. All right, so next up, I guess we need to add a new view controller for showing upload progress. So I get to use this new object library thing. I always forget it's up here, but I actually like it because it's always visible.
I can never remember the keyboard shortcut because I don't use it that often.
Yep. And it looks like I just hit enter and it put it somewhere. There it is.
So this will be our progress UI?
Yeah. So what I was thinking is that we would have something like a cancel button and then progress indicator and then a couple labels. One indicating like we're uploading this file and then another one indicating like the bytes transferred. So this would be like uploading some file. And this would be like that. Something like that. All right, so let's do leading space, top space. trailing space, vertical spacing, leading edges, and trailing space. This one I'll do leading space. I wanted this to be a little bit over, so it's like right now it's plus 12. So if I just change the outlet to be 12, that'll fix that. And then I want these to be a different color. After doing some Mojave dark mode stuff, it is becoming increasingly apparent that every time you pick a color, you have to be super careful to pick like a system color or one from your asset catalog.
Yeah, I think this one should be label color and the bottom one should be secondary. Label color. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
That works.
So that's going to work well in dark mode.
Yeah. Vertical spacing there, and then this to this will be greater than or equal to, I don't know, 12. Okay, I think that's good. This is going to be a new view controller, so let's add the class for it. This will be upload file view controller.
So you always import AppKit. I import Cocoa.
Cocoa?
Yeah.
it's identical, right?
Not exactly. I think Cocoa includes car data as well for some reason. So Cocoa is basically Foundation, AppKit, and car data in one thing.
Oh, okay. But AppKit also includes Foundation.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm going to open up the assistant editor so we can link some of these things up. One thing I noticed is when you copy and paste buttons, they inherit their bindings and everything from where you copied them from.
That's dangerous.
Okay, so then let's see. The view controller class will be upload file. It actually worked that time. Wow. Okay.
Wow.
And in the past, I've connected this to dismiss controller. But because we want to handle the cancel ourselves and actually cancel the download or upload, I think I need to do this and have an action for this.
Yeah,
button.
It's a good idea. You might think that you could just hook up view will disappear and cancel then, but view will disappear is called in other
like if you change focus, right?
Yeah, if you minimize and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a better idea to just hook it up directly.
Okay, and before I forget, I'm going to copy the class name and paste it as the storyboard ID.
That should be a default. I think we should file a radar.
Let's see, I need the title label as an outlet and the progress indicator as an outlet and the stats label as an outlet. Okay. Let's go back to code. So this guy is going to take let's see, we're going to have a reference to a Rev client that we're going to use for the upload. I'll make that implicitly unwrapped because I want this to be created and viewed at load. And then what else do we need? That means I need to import RevKit at the top. And we're going to have a file URL that we're uploading. And in this case, even though the drag supports multiple files, I'm only going to upload the first one just to keep things simple. I think it would probably make sense to make this upload file view controller work with multiple files. And I think once we got one working, it would be pretty trivial to add multiple. But this keeps things a little simple for now.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is a pattern that I use a lot. Like the model object that a view controller needs can be set before the view is loaded or after. And so I'll usually say if is view loaded, then start upload like that. And then, let's see, do I want to, yeah. And then in viewed load,
I don't use storyboards, so my view controller would receive the file URL as an
An
init
initializer.
parameter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in viewed load, I would say if file URL is not nil, then start upload. So that way I have both cases covered. Let's add actions here, and then
Yeah, that's something that when I use zibs or storyboards, because I'm not used to them, I generally don't use them. It always gets me. I forget to check if the view is loaded before setting something, and then the app will crash, and take me a while to realize what happened.
Right. Okay, so in the start upload, let's see, I also need to create that rev client. And here's where it's a little bit awkward because our credentials could be not present right now. So basically we have rev credentials.current, which gives us our credentials.
But is it possible for you to reach that screen without having credentials?
You could go back to preferences at any time, right? And change them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that here. And change that to a guard, and then else. And then at this point, maybe present an alert. For now, I'm just going to do fatal error. But I think that in the future, you could say, have some sort of alert that says like, oh, please enter your credentials, or take you straight to the set preferences screen rather than an alert. Right?
Yep.
Okay, so we can say client equals rev client with those credentials. And then at this point, client.upload file. And this guy takes the progress instance. And I'm not sure, I'm sort of thinking the other way may be better, where the rev client creates the progress and returns it.
Yeah, that's how I would do it. Maybe it will return the progress, or
well, it
maybe
returns
there will
the task.
be.
So I would have to return two things.
Yeah, but maybe you could have a separate block that when the upload starts, you have a separate block that gets called with the progress. But that's an option you have.
So in this case, I'm hanging on to it here. The file URL is that. Progress is this. And our completion block looks like that, which takes a result.
We have a question in the chat whether I use zip files exclusively for laying out views. No, I don't. I generally don't use neither zips nor storyboards. I don't like interface builder in general. And he mentions that he does his UI encode on iOS, but doing so is tedious on macOS, and that's not true. It's basically the same thing. It used to be harder on the Mac. The initializers for things were not very friendly for you to do stuff programmatically, but that changed recently. So doing your UI encode on the Mac is not any more difficult than doing it on iOS. Except for the fact that you're probably more familiar with iOS. So yeah, of course it's harder if you're not familiar with it.
All right, so I need to hang on to this progress, and we also need to observe it. So I'm going to have a progress observation, which is going to be an any, and also the upload task, URL session upload task, because we need to be able to cancel it.
Why is progress observation an any?
Well, if we observe this, progress.observe, that returns a key value observation.
Yeah, I usually use that one.
I guess it's more clear.
Yeah, because you can call invalidate on it if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I've always just used it to like as a garbage collection thing, just like nil it out when you're done with it.
Cool.
Right, which will stop observing. So this is the progress observation equals progress.observe. The key path will be fraction completed. And in the change handler, we'll have progress and the change. Let's see. What else do we need? Progress, that needs to be non-optional. I usually like doing this. And then
So
save it.
progress is not a value type. Just to make it clear, it's actually an NS object.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you can actually pass it to something else and can modify the progress.
Okay, so in the upload task, in the results, we need to switch on this results. In the case of success, we'll have a location. And right now, I'll just print that out, because we'll have to figure out what to do with the success case. And in the case of failed, we'll have an error. And in this case, I'm just going to present error like that. We need a self there.
And as with the other Rev client things, this is already called on the main queue, right?
All of this is called on the main queue. This is less obvious that it's called on the main queue, and I'll tell you why. When we set up our session in this upload input file, we're setting it up to call back on delegate queue operation queue.main. So all of the progress calls are going to be done on the main queue. If usually when I'm developing, if I'm not sure, I will just run assert thread.isMain thread just to double check.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to crash loudly.
You can also use the main thread checker.
The sanitizer?
Yeah, I don't think it's called sanitizer.
That's in
diagnostics.
Here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, main thread checker.
Oh, okay, cool.
And you can also tell it to pause on issues, so it's going to have basically the same effect.
Okay. Well, since that's on, I don't need that.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Okay, so we've got our upload task. The upload is happening. We're going to get these changes over time. So we need to update our UI based on this progress. So here we have our progress indicator, and the default min value is 0. The default max value is 100. So if I set the what is it called? Double value. If I set the double value to our progress.fraction completed, I need to multiply that by 100 to get an accurate 0 to 100 range, because fraction completed will be from 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our stats label, which we need to update. And that needs to be some sort of, value out of something uploaded. For that, I want to use byte count formatter.
Nice.
And the way this works, it does so much work for you. We have on the progress instance, we have a completed unit count, which is an int64, so the types match there. And the count style here allows you to say memory or binary or platform, I think is one of the others.
And of course, autocomplete is not working.
Yeah. But anyway, I was reading the documentation for this. It really depends on what you want to display. If this is like a file on disk, then you should use a certain count style. There it is right here. And so I think file is probably appropriate here. And this is platform specific, so they can change it over time. And then that's why they tell you don't use binary. Like if you look at the documentation, it says you should probably use file rather than binary, because it depends on the specifics of the operating system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a hard drive vendor, then you want your hard drives to appear larger, so that you will, you'll choose the the format of the bytes that makes your hard drive look bigger.
Yeah.
In our case, I'm just going to use file, count style file. Okay, so that is the completed bytes. And then the total bytes is the same thing. But this is total unit count. And those completed unit count and total unit count are set by the Rev client during the upload. Okay, so this would be completed bytes out of total bytes uploaded. And so what's cool about this is that if you're uploading bytes, then it'll say bytes. If it's uploading kilobytes, then it'll say kilobytes. If you're in megabytes or gigabytes, you'll see those, and it knows when to switch from one to the other, which is pretty cool. Okay, so we've got progress. I never did set the title of the, our title label. So that's going to come from our file URL, which needs to be here. Actually, this should probably be in the setter for this, right? In which case we need it in both.
Yeah. Actually, I think at this point you should probably encapsulate those
These two things into a method.
Function. Yeah.
So
I call it update UI.
Yeah, but update UI is also kicking off a download, which is a little bit misleading.
Tricky.
So here maybe I could say start upload with file, maybe.
Yep.
That works better. With file URL.
And it should also prevent
so we
this,
actually, so in this case, we
can be called 2 times.
So if this gets set before view did load, then it'll skip it, right?
Yeah.
And so it'll happen here. But if view did load has already happened, then it'll skip this one and it'll do this one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true, because file URL will be new. Yeah. That's why I don't use storyboards.
Yeah. Now there is a kind of an interesting trick when you're using KVO. I actually like this trick a lot. So let's say we wanted to like KVO this guy, right? I think in order to do that, that would have to be dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we had that, then we could say file URL observe, or rather, sorry, we're going to observe ourselves with the file URL thing here. And one of these observe calls has options.
Yeah, and you can pass initial and new and stuff.
Yeah, so the NS key value observing options, you can pass in the initial value and the new value. So what's cool about that is that your observation method gets triggered immediately with the current value. And so it allows you to have one code path again. But even with Swift's KVO stuff, it's still somewhat of an obtuse API to use.
Yeah.
Okay. So now here I would set the title label .string value to be uploading, and then the file URL's last path component. All right.
And now we need to actually show the progress.
Let me do cancel, because this is going to be easy. If we have an upload task, we can cancel it. And then call dismiss self. So back over here, when this is happening, I need to create an instance of this and give it the file URL. So that's on new order view controller in our accept drop method. Here I will say, let's create a upload VC. Instantiate. And I haven't upgraded to Swift 4.2 yet, so we still have to do this NS storyboard dot scene identifier, and then pass in the name.
You
And
could
that can be optional.
extend the scene identifier and add a static.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I usually do, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, and projects I've done in the past, I've used r.swift to generate this stuff automatically. So you would just literally say like r.storyboard.upload file view controller .instantiate, because it creates like a strongly typed wrapper around all that stuff.
Interesting.
And then on Mac, though, r.swift isn't, I don't think they support Mac at all. So I've been using SwiftGen.
That's very typical.
I've been using SwiftGen for that, and SwiftGen gives you way more control over what gets generated. It's not just every asset, everything, and you can provide your own templates and stuff, which is kind of interesting, but it's a little bit more work to get that to happen. Okay, so if we have this upload VC, we need to give the upload VC our first URL like that, and then present it. Looks like I need as upload file view controller, then present as sheet upload VC. Okay, let's try it out.
Moment of truth. How big is that file?
300 megabytes.
Oh.
Oh, I was still returning false from the method, so that's why it snapped back. But seems like it's working.
Yeah. Now try canceling it.
Yeah,
Cancel.
it worked.
Yeah. Nice.
One caveat with cancellation, which I should probably call out. If we go back into our Rev client and we are, did complete with error. Where is this? We have the, actually it wouldn't be here. Never mind. When you cancel a request, it often will call you back with an error that says canceled. So I find myself often having to check to see if the error I'm getting is user cancellation error, and if so, I'll ignore it.
Yeah, the code is -999 apparently.
Yep. Okay, so we have all that done. For the validate drop, all of this stuff will return true here, and return false everywhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing that I noticed is that I didn't finish my implementation of the API client. So right now, that in the success case, it will return the string OK. And so we'll have to fix that.
That's very concise. Just OK.
Is there any reason why? Is this because I made it that big? I need to make this
That's
smaller.
because you added a trailing constraint to the uploading title label, and it's not it's an equality constraint, so it won't let you shrink the window.
Yep.
That should be like greater than or equal to standard.
What is the standard? 20?
You can that's the 22. Little arrow to the side of the field, the constant. You can
okay. I have never seen that before.
Yeah, so that's cool. Going to use the guidelines automatically.
I've been playing around with unified logging, and I think I have turned something on my machine, because I get flooded with boring SSL logs.
You probably enabled debug
logging. Yeah, I need to restart that. I reset it to the defaults.
Unified logging is a very nice API, though. I love it.
I have mixed feelings about it. I'm switching to it because I find it to be pretty useful, but man, it is not easy to use.
The problem I have with it is that you can't read your own logs, so that's a bummer.
Yeah, from within your app. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so our upload completed. We're getting that OK string that I talked about. But if you look in here, the location header tells us where it should be. So what we need to do now is on successful upload, we need to dismiss the view controller and then call some delegate method. So this guy needs to have some sort of protocol. And what did we say about this last time to do
Any object.
any object like that?
Yeah.
So that we can do week.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would be like upload completed successfully. Let's see, we need the file and the location.
I've seen some people dismiss the usage of delegation recently. So
In
what's
favor
your
of
opinion?
blocks?
Yeah.
I think this lets you formalize it better than using blocks. I think sometimes blocks are, it's not as obvious that you're supposed to do that. Like for instance,
Yeah,
if a class has
precisely.
a delegate, you click on the delegate and you see all the methods that you could potentially implement. I think that's really good, like documentation. But it really depends on like the gravity of what you're doing. If it's a formal operation with a formal contract, I think that a delegate is preferable to a block. And it also
Yeah, I actually
avoids
like.
it ends up avoiding the retain cycle issue because blocks seem like really easy to adopt, but as soon as you start needing to interact with self inside the block, you really have to be cautious. And then the block starts getting really ugly really fast when you have to weakify your own self instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have the same issues. I feel like delegation makes it very clear what you have to handle from a specific entity. So in this case, all that needs to be handled is the completion of the upload in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And the retain cycle as well. Of course, you could forget to add week to your delegate, but it's
Yep.
much easier to forget week in several blocks.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to go looking over an entire declaration of a class just to find the blocks which are not clear sometimes from the property names.
Right.
So I really feel like delegation is still a very valid approach.
Okay, so what I needed to do next is for this, let's see, not there, here. We have our result with a string, and right here we're just passing an OK, but this needs to come from the location header, which is the response dot header fields location, like that, and that should be a string. Sometimes I hate this because you have to consider the case like, what if the API returned the wrong location, in which case this is not a success and the server's experiencing issues. And so I need yet another if let, would say, okay, return success with that location. And in the else case, I'll say result is dot failure or failed with some sort of error. And now I need to create that error.
Yeah, I was talking to before about my operation-based networking system, and I had the same issue that like networking operations can fail in many different ways. So you can get an error, you can get no error but no data, you can get a success but the data is invalid. You can get success, the data is valid, but the data itself is indicating an error. So there's the response is like
And
error.
I have seen APIs which return an HTTP 200, and inside of here is an error message.
Of course.
And that just it is kind of hilarious.
Have you seen that your API is a Hall of Shame video?
No, but I want to.
Yeah, I'll find the link.
Okay. Okay, so I think this is good enough. We should be able to get a location now. In the new order view controller here, I need to set myself as the delegate for that. So we'll create an extension on new order view controller, which is a file upload file view controller delegate. Upload completed successfully. And at this point, we had some sort of model object, right? Order input table row,
Yeah, we do.
which took the file name and a string. Check that out. So we'll pass in the location, and the file name will be file.lastPath component.
So the name of the video I mentioned is You Give Rest a Bad Name. And it's a parody of the Bon Jovi song. So look that up on YouTube.
Okay, that's funny. Let's see, input items. Yeah. So now if you append to this, does it? It does call reload data, right?
Yeah.
So I should say input items dot append row.
Yeah, so Swift arrays are value types. So if you append, you get the set call.
Okay. Looks like we have a bit of commiserating in the chat with the did fail with error call after the response successfully completes. Pretty hilarious. Actually,
Yeah.
the shape of this API is a little bit strange because you get did complete with error. It makes you think that you got an error. Another gotcha here is that if you receive a response, you receive a response in headers immediately before you've seen any body data. And so in this case, I had to check to see what the response was, hang on to it so that I can look at it later, and then tell it to continue, because what I was getting before was I had a malformed header. So the server was returning an HTTP 400, but I didn't see the body data because I was triggering the error here. So I basically needed to say, okay, go ahead and continue, even though it's a 400, so that I can capture the body data here. And then later I will say did complete with error. Error will again be nil because it did successfully complete the request. But this is where I could say, okay, the body data had this string in it, and that way I can present that error to the user. So it's a little bit awkward. I think the URL session stuff with the blocks, when you break it out into multiple methods, it starts to change shape quite drastically.
Yeah, the did complete with error thing definitely threw me off several times.
Okay, did we dismiss the view controller after
Nope,
after success?
I don't think so.
Do that first. So we call the delegate. Where is that? Here, and then dismiss.
And here we could argue whether we should be dismissing ourselves or letting the delegate itself dismiss us.
Yeah, since I'm already doing it here, I think that
Yeah.
I would be okay doing in both cases. But I think
Consistency.
when we ran into the case before where the upload failed, you remember with the URL case, we typed in a URL and we hit OK, and let's say we had a typo in the URL. So then the actual API call was happening elsewhere. So these two things have quite a bit different interfaces. Our add input view controller really was just a dumb form with a URL. And because it was a dumb form, it had to do more delegation in order to know whether to dismiss itself, whether the form was enabled, right? Because during the upload, we had to enable and disable form. Initially, when I said that this add input view controller by URL should be dumb and not talk to API clients, I think that's a worthy goal. But the shape it took after the fact meant that I had to expose these methods so that the parent controller who's doing the work could say, okay, you need to disable the form, but you're going to stay visible, because if there's an error, we want them to be able to, fix any typos with the value that they entered before. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit weird. I think that in the end, I think I prefer this approach where this view controller is talking to the API client directly, because this upload is going on. Okay. Moment of truth.
It's slow now.
That's funny.
You're being throttled.
I probably am, because why is that bouncing? That's weird.
There's one little thing we should do. I think I noticed now that you dragged the file in there and the app was not active.
Uh-huh.
So the app should probably activate itself when you
Okay.
drop the file in there.
So let's do that. That's in the new order view controller in the accept drop method.
Yeah,
So
so
here,
right as you present it, you can call NSApp and activate, ignoring other apps. I think you can pass through in this case.
is normally set to false. When the Finder launches an app using the value of false for a flag, allows the app to become active if the user waits for it to launch, but the app remains unobtrusive if the user activates another app. That is very confusing.
Yeah.
It's normally set to false. So maybe I should just follow that convention because I don't really understand this thing yet.
Yeah, I think in this case it doesn't really matter because the user has just interacted with your app.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't make much of a difference.
Yep.
We should also give the window a title.
That's true. I don't have enough time. I want to watch it complete. Should these things typically be animated? Should I be animating the progress from one to the other?
I don't think so. I think that's the standard behavior.
It feels very chunky.
Yeah.
I guess even if we animated that, if we animated that, then the byte count label would still feel chunky.
Oh, I know what you need to do. You need to set to call start animating in the progress indicator.
Oh, okay. See, that is in here.
Also, I noticed that when the upload completes, there's a little delay before the completion is called and the controller is dismissed. So maybe when it reaches 100%, we should set the progress indicator to be indeterminate.
Indeterminate. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that will
here,
be a nice touch.
if fraction completed is 1, then we'll set the progress indicator dot.
Is indeterminate is true. Yeah.
So that'll change it to like the backwards striped animation thing.
Yeah, it's going to give
Okay.
the
Yeah, that's
little
cool.
bouncing thing.
Okay, so I noticed that it did not update our table view. So let's figure out why. We did get a location, which was correct. We called this. I never set delegate to self, did I?
Yeah.
That is in here.
I bet that's what happened. See, delegates are bad.
Okay, I do have in my downloads folder, I think I've got a 12 megabyte file, which we can use. So that'll be much faster. Okay, I did actually see it animating. It was probably hard to catch on the stream, but I did see that animating. And we got the file name and the URN.
Yay.
So the only other thing we would need to do is turn this on, which is going to use the open save panel.
Yeah, open panel.
Okay, so let's see. I think we have time to do that.
I think the first step would be to extract the showing of the upload view controller to a separate method.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have to call it from somewhere else. So I think that's.
So this would be show upload, or this is really like upload file.
Yeah.
Let's see, private func upload file. Now these can be guards.
Yeah, that's my favorite part about extracting functionality to a separate method. You can use guards more freely.
Yep. The NSApp activate is really for drop. So I think that I'm going to keep that up here.
Yeah.
This can be URL. Okay. So I'm trying to remember where we set that thing to disabled. It was because it didn't have an action associated with it, right?
Yeah, you have
Because
to
this
set an
one
action.
has an action URL clicked. So we need another one for this guy. Come on, Xcode. I could be lazy and just put it anywhere, but I like to keep things tidy. Let's see. File clicked. Maybe add input from file clicked is a little bit more descriptive. Okay, so here I need to open up a panel to select the file, and then we can start the upload. So you want to walk me through that? Because I've never done that before.
Okay, so you're going to instantiate an NS open panel. And it's just, you can initialize it without anything.
Okay.
So you can set several things. One of them is the prompt, which is what's going to be in the button. And in this case, it should be upload, because that's the action that's going to happen when the user clicks the button. You can also set the allowed file types.
Are
So
these
this is
UTIs or no?
no, that's the issue. These are actually, I'm not sure. Maybe you can use UTIs. I never tried that. So maybe try that and let's see if it works. But I'm pretty sure that's just extensions.
Well, let's just read the docs. Or a UTI.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Today I learned.
Yeah.
Should read the documentation. So
I have to say that I've been working for the past couple of months on a framework that has zero documentation. So it's refreshing when you actually see detailed docs like this. And I think that's part of the reason is because this API is so old that they've had time to write robust documentation that sort of lasts for a long time. But when you're dealing with stuff that just was announced at DubDub, documentation is usually the last thing that they do.
Yeah, open panel, I'm pretty sure it exists since next step. So the way you present an open panel, you have two options. You can either run it modally, which is openpanel.run modal, which is the easier way, or you can call begin sheet model for window, and it's going to run it as a sheet.
I'm not really sure if I know what the thinking is behind this. Like which one is preferred? Like if I do open in Xcode, this is modal, right?
Yeah.
Actually,
in this case, I think
it's not even modal because I can click behind it.
Yeah. In this case, I think we should do modal because you're going to immediately open another one as a sheet, which is the uploads one. So you can just call run model, and you don't need to read the response from the run model. You can just write because it's going to block when you call run model.
Oh, okay.
So you
this
can
could
just
be particularly bad if you have something else running on the main thread.
Yeah. So you should probably
like animations or
it's not going to it puts your run loop in a different mode, so that's why it's called modal.
Okay.
So but the effect it has in the method is that the line below it is only going to get called once the open panel is dismissed, and you don't need the response.
Handy. I don't even need the response.
Yeah, you don't need that. You can just look for the open panel's URL.
So if it canceled, that'll be nil.
Yep. And it has another one which is an array, but since we're only interested in one file, we can use
is
this
that
one.
like a setting where you can say multiple?
Yeah.
So that's probably false by default.
No, it's true.
When the value is true.
Oh no, yeah, I read the false true.
Good to know. Okay, so if we have a selected URL, then I can upload that file.
Yep.
And so I don't need to do any dismissing or anything like that. It already does that.
Yeah. You see, that's a lot easier than using the photo picker on iOS.
Right. Right. Now okay, so this is one thing that really bugs me. I'm just going to show you. When I open up ScreenFlow, and let's say I do a new document, and then I try to export it. Well, it's not going to do that. I think I need to add something to it. Anyway, when I go export, they have. Maybe I should show this because I think this is worthwhile. Let me add a new recording real quick. Oh, OBS is preventing me from doing that. We'll add that. Okay. Okay, so let's say I wanted to export this. This thing really bugs me because I do this every week, sometimes multiple times per week, where I need to put this in the appropriate folder. And I know there's like some apps have a different style of like a location picker.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always click other and then go out to my episodes folder so I can pick the right episode that it is and then put that in the export folder. So every week I've got to change it. And so it's just one of those like annoying things that I don't know why they chose this style where it saves your last known export folder. Cause for me, it's never the same folder.
Yeah, that's a custom export UI they created. They should probably.
Well, you've seen this before, right? Where you say you see like some suggestions of recent places, whatever, and then you click other, and this is what I actually want.
They should probably just run the save panel before showing the export options. So let you choose the destination before.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a weird decision.
Okay, so everything else should be the same then. Let's try it. We got a little weird visual glitch here because that animation can't continue, or that visual state can't continue until that's done.
Yeah, that's actually correct. The behavior is correct, but probably the configuration of the button is not ideal, because what you want is for the element that activated the modal dialog to be shown as activated.
Mm-hmm.
So you know where that came from.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So maybe we just need that border to show up right here underneath.
Yeah.
There. So it's just got to
the type of the button maybe is not the best one.
Let's see this one. These are all big, but I'll just go with it.
Yeah. Okay, it's working.
That's awesome.
And the UTI thing worked as well.
Yeah, there's like, it's funny that when you pair a program like this, like my biggest takeaway from this, in addition to just getting some experience with OpenPanel, as silly as it sounds, is this little constraint thing over here that I had no idea that you could set standard here. And
it doesn't work all the time. There are some circumstances where there's no standard, so it doesn't show up. But I usually just go for the standard. And they added that for programmatically when you create using anchors, you can set the constraint you can set to constraints greater than or equal to standard system something giant method name, but yeah, you can do it programmatically as well.
Yep. Okay, so I think the next step for this app would be to have a little button here that is enabled if the table view has rows in it, and then submit the order. But I don't think we could get through that today because I haven't even looked at the API for that yet. So I think we've reached our goal for today and under time. So I think we could probably turn it over to chat if they have any questions.
Yeah, so if you guys in the chat have any questions, please let us know. We are glad you watched and didn't go and install the public beta.
Oh, I don't hold any. I won't hold any grudges if they did.
Maybe there's a game going on as well.
A
I
World
think,
Cup game today?
yeah, I think so.
I
Maybe.
don't know. I stopped paying attention after Mexico lost. I did see England's shootout though, penalty shootout, and
Yeah, that was
I
interesting.
don't typically follow soccer that much, but apparently they've never won a penalty shootout in the World Cup, so it's big news for them.
And they almost lost.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no game today. The games restart tomorrow.
Okay, well, I guess that if we have no questions in the chat, I guess we'll wrap it up a little early. I want to thank you again for joining me. It's been super informative, and I think that every time I announce one of these, I get people who say they're like really excited for us to keep doing these. So
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a fun experiment.
yeah, and then maybe next year we'll be updating it for Marzipan. There has been some rumors and all this about what this means for AppKit and the state of the Mac and things like that. And after running some of the Marzipan apps, you probably know a lot more about this than I do, but after just my initial take on running Marzipan apps within Mojave, the experience is very non-native, non like
Mhm.
it feels like a foreign app, and it kind of reminds me of like Electron apps in general, where they just look different.
Mhm.
Adobe Air had the same issue long time ago, and so I think that these apps, I think it'll probably work for some class of applications, but this particular app, I think it makes sense for us to use like native Mac controls and Mac look and feel and Windows and Sheets and all that stuff, rather than try to take the iOS approach, which would end up
Yeah,
being
and
table views most likely and modal view controllers and stuff like that.
yeah, and the amount of work that we are having to do with this app, you mostly, is not any different from what it would take to make an iOS app.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
really just like it's a little bit more complicated because you're not as familiar with the Mac API,
Uh huh.
so it's a little more work, but overall it's not that much different. And yeah, you're right. The Marzipan apps, they are different. They are not native Mac apps. They, of course, they are better than Electron apps because they don't use as much resources, and
Yeah.
they integrate better with the system. Even things like drag and drop work, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, they are not like Mac apps, and the good thing that's going to come from that is that iOS only apps that would make some sort of sense on the Mac can be brought to the Mac with minimal effort, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that benefits everyone.
Yeah. I do think it's kind of funny that Apple considers that a cross-platform angle, whereas the cross-platform angle for everybody else, for people doing Electron apps, is literally running it on Windows and Linux, and Mac not running on iOS and iPad and tvOS and the Watch and the Mac. Even those are different platforms. They're all from the same vendor, and not everybody, runs a Mac. So I think it's just kind of funny that they call that a cross-platform solution. Well, I guess they're not calling it a solution yet, but I think that's where if you read the tea leaves, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.